Well, hello and welcome to today's episode of the Power of Your Mind podcast. You're listening to episode number 133, number 133. I'm Victoria Gallagher, Law of Attraction hypnotist and number one best-selling author of Practical Law of Attraction: Align Yourself with the Manifesting Conditions and Successfully Attract Your Desires. I'm also the founder of HipTalk.com and HypnoCloud apps, which gives you access to over 500 hypnosis recordings right in the palm of your hand. So be sure to download that app from the app stores today. And today I have a very special guest with me, Noa Ronen. Noa Ronen, MBA PCC speaker, coach, author, vlogger, disruptor, and coffee lover, brings more than 20 years of experience in change management, human resources, project management, and coaching. Noa encourages progressive leaders and social business leaders to shift from doing business leadership to being a business leader so they can see new and wanted actions and see the change they desire. Noa's personal relocation experience resulted in a refreshing view of the world that invites you, rather than looking for the differences in others, to open your mind and heart and see people and situations differently. This is what Noa calls beyond leadership. Beyond leadership. Where your new way of being inspires and influences others. And you can purchase Noa's book on Amazon, Beyond Leadership: From Aware Less to Awareness, Dare to Be the Leader You Can Be. And so today, Noa is going to be sharing some of her insights on beyond leadership, how to look beyond the action. So welcome to the show, Noa.
Hey, so good to be here, Victoria. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's so glad to have you, and I'm just so delighted that today is today, and I get to interview you today. Last time we had some technical difficulties,
Yeah,
so we're
yeah.
a little like 1 week later in this and airing this episode than we had
Yeah, we are
originally.
beyond.
We're beyond. I love it. And I love your beyond. That is
Yeah,
wonderful. So tell us
yeah.
just a little bit about yourself and, just how you got started in leadership and business and teaching business leaders how to do this. Where did you get your start?
Yeah, so it's actually sometimes I say that it started in the playground. I don't know if you had the same experience, but I actually remember as a little girl that I had that influence that I will open my mouth and I will say something and I will be able to influence the kids, not manipulate them, okay? Not manipulate them, but able to say something and see people responding to it and wanting to move on my direction. It happened again later on when I was a young change management consultant sitting in boardrooms with CEOs and SVPs and just opening my mouth and talking, and most of the times people will follow my ideas. And that first part of my life was in Israel. I lived in Israel until my 30s, and then my husband had a job opportunity, moved to the US, and we moved with two little kids to New York City.
Oh,
Lived in
wow.
Brooklyn, cute Brooklyn, love Brooklyn. And I thought it will be fine. I wasn't naive. I didn't think that right away everything will be perfect. But I thought that with MBA, executive experience that I had then in human resources, I will find my way. But I was actually stuck for almost 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And
Wow.
yeah, for almost 5 years. And the reason is that suddenly that impact with my voice, with my beautiful vocabulary changed because I had to speak in my second language. And it's not like I couldn't speak English, it felt differently. It felt that I cannot bring the same influence as I do in my first language. And I felt handicapped, and I actually sabotaged myself. I will go to different opportunities that I have, whether it was jobs I wanted or other opportunities, and I will say all the right things because I was in human resources. So I knew what to say. But in my head, there was a voice telling me, you're not able to do that in your second language. No one will hire you with your lousy English. And I sabotaged myself this way for almost 5 years. And what really shifted the experience was when I started blogging. I didn't blog, by the way, in English. I blogged in Hebrew, my first language. And I shared about being an
This
Israeli
is
mother.
blogging with a B as in boy.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
not
So
vlogging, but
not vlogging
blogging.
yet. Blogging,
Yes.
it's we talk about 13, 14 years ago, 13 years ago, we moved to the US 15 years ago. So it was 2 years, 3 years into the process, started blogging. Blogging then was, having a blog then was like having a podcast today. And I started sharing my thoughts and my ideas, and actually in a very humoristic way. And people started responding. And that's when things started to shift for me, um, because after a while people asked me to coach them, and that was
Mm.
surprising because I was so lost, not sure what to do, where to take myself. And I didn't coach the people who asked me. And what's funny about it's I launched the website with the blog and actually relocation consulting services. And at the same week, women from different states in the US, Israeli women, called me and said, I saw your business. How do you do that? I'm so stuck with my life. Can you coach me? And that's when,
Wow.
right? It was weird. And I said, okay, I bumped my head into the wall for so long. It's time to listen to the universe. Let me go and check what's this all coaching is all about, because I actually thought it's a scam. And 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 that's how I got into coaching 12 years ago. Started with the Israeli women in New York City, found my confidence, and started coaching more and more people, getting referrals. And that's when I got back to work with leaders. So I'm going to stop here. There's a
That
lot
is
more to the story.
I'm loving this so far. I mean, that is incredible. First of all, I just really, my hats are off to anyone who can learn the English language in the first place. After growing up knowing some other language, like I've never spoken a second language, and
Mm-hmm.
living here in the United States, there's so many different languages that I've thought about learning, but I've just never taken that plunge because it just seems like such an undertaking. And so just when I was listening to you say, yeah, you kind of lost your voice a little bit when came here and you're speaking in a different language. I can't even imagine being influential to some, and like let
Yeah.
alone just being able to say the words and get the sentence correct. Found yourself in a place where you're like stuck, because of the fact that you are just learning a different language and having to try to be powerful and influential. And that I just commend you for even continuing along that path. And so it's really, really interesting just to hear your story so far. So you say that, so you teach business leaders how to
Mm-hmm.
stop doing leadership and
Mm-hmm.
shift to being a leader. So what do you mean
Yeah.
exactly by that?
Yeah. And I do this work with business leaders and also with executives and people inside companies. So I do it both in both spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and here is the deal. And I will go back to the story just to explain that, and then we can talk about how we do that in business or any leadership. By the way, it's for me, leadership, you can be a parent and be a leader. I believe sometimes it starts with your family, right? So there are so many different ways. And what happened in my situation is that for years before the relocation, I just knew what the actions that will help me being seen. And most of us are trying to be seen from our actions because that's what we learned when we were little kids. Be a good
Mm-hmm.
boy and go clean up your room. Be a good
Oh, yeah.
girl and
You
do
get
your homework.
rewarded for the
Right?
actions that you take.
Yes. Yes. And we see who's the person to get promoted, who's the person to be seen, the people who take the actions. It's like in the US, right? It's you're going to do hard work, you're going to hustle, right? You're going to see results. That's what we hear, that's what we see. And that's kind of like the belief or the pattern that we have that we need to focus on actions. And I was the same. I focused on the actions. I had that saying that even if I'm not the smartest, the quickest, whatever, I know how to take the actions to be seen with, my ability with influencing through my words. So I really believe that all I need here, in the US is someone to open for me to open for me the door and give me an opportunity to show how I work for my actions, right? But what I missed while looking for that opportunity is that I kept taking the same actions that worked for me before. But
Mm-hmm.
what was missing is the being energy. And now I will explain what I mean by that. So I believe that all of us have in us two energies: the doing energy right? It's the actions, the planning, the doing.
Mm-hmm.
And there is the other energy, and the other energy is the being. And I see
Mm-hmm.
them kind of like the yin and yang. They don't
I was
compete with
literally
each
thinking
other. Yeah,
that.
they complete each other. And the being energy are the emotions and the mindset. And when we talk about mindset, just to explain, it's the thoughts, the fears, the beliefs, the perspectives, the aspirations. It's the positive or negative being.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't pay attention to my being. And part of my being was that voice, that belief that I cannot create what I had in Israel with my second language. And it wasn't like I had to learn this language from scratch. We talk English in Israel, we email in English, we study in the university in English. So it's not like I came with no English, with knowing 3 words. I had a vast vocabulary, but not as good as when I speak Hebrew. And
Mm-hmm.
that was my belief. And that was the barrier, the hurdle I put to myself, and how I sabotaged myself in a way with my being energy. And what I
Mm-hmm.
explain to people is that if we don't, it's not like doing is better than the being, or being is better than the doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about that. It's learning to pay attention to both the being and the doing. If we just focus on actions, we can't see new results because we keep using the same actions we always used. And that didn't work for me anymore. And we
Right.
can see that, for example, when people leave workspace and they start their own business. And suddenly the actions that help them succeed, working in teams, working in a company space, doesn't work for them because, for example, suddenly I need to network and I don't know how to do that. And that's when the being energy shows up. I'm not good at it. I don't know how to do that. I feel uncomfortable. I'm an introvert, right? There are all these different things that bring feelings and thoughts that get in our way. On the other side, if we bring different thoughts and emotions, our actions can bring new results. And when you talked about the voice, just to connect that to what you said you lost your voice when you moved to the US, and that's true. I didn't think about it this way. I did lose my voice, and when I started writing, it was the first time I allowed the voice of the emotions and the thoughts to show up. Luckily, I wasn't a bummer, I wasn't a party pooper who wrote all the bad emotions and thoughts that I had, because I experienced shame, I experienced anger, and I didn't want to deal with that. So I just pushed it away, right? And focused on the actions. but because I didn't see results, I would look in the mirror and say, who's that woman? How come you can bring results, right? So suddenly, when I started writing, bringing humor to the situation, I started creating an outlet to my being energy. And that's when people could remind me that I am resourceful because they started responding to what I was writing. And it allowed me to be feel resourceful again and recreate what I needed, or recreate what I needed to create in my life from a place that I started engaging my actions and my being. So that's the idea of the being and doing energy, and that's how it shows up also when you create your business. uh, a lot of times I see that when people are being promoted, because that's where we are shaken up, right? We are not used to
Yeah.
it. Something
Yeah.
new is happening there, and the actions don't work for us anymore.
Right.
We need to pay attention to the being to bring new actions and to see new results.
That's so true when it comes to actions. So many people just act, 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 act without even, coming from that pure place of why am I doing this, and feeling the actions and being what it is that they need to be in order to take actions from that place of being. And
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, you have people on the other end of the spectrum who
Exactly.
just be, but then they don't take any action.
They
So
don't see any action because there's so much in their being. So that's a lot of times what the problem is with the being energy. When
yeah, can you speak to that a little bit about how you can, like how do you find the right balance in this?
Yeah, so this is a work you need to be willing to do. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's a work. Some people will call it mindfulness, and my book, I call it Beyond Leadership from awareless. When you are not able to see, right, there is no awareness there. So from awareless to awareness, where you find what it is that you don't know. So mostly I call it the deer effect. I'm not sure if where you live there are deer on the road, right? When you drive and it can bump into you. So if you don't know how to drive in an area when there are deers, they will just bump into you one day, right? You need to learn how to drive differently. So that's sometimes what happens in our lives, right? The aware that we have tendencies. It's probably when people listen to me and I talk about the being and doing energy, you probably never thought about it this way, right? So you never paid attention to you that you might have tendencies to be more in your actions, or maybe the other way around, to be more in your emotions and your thoughts. And even there, some people are more in their emotions or more in their thoughts. So we all have tendencies in different ways, and we need to understand our tendencies, our autopilots. And that's a work that most of the times it's really hard to find on your own. Mostly you will get the feedback from someone. So it's or the deer will bump into you and something big will happen and you will realize, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble, I need to work on that. Sometimes your body, right, will tell you, I'm done, right? Or another
Mm-hmm.
person. A lot of times people will do at they can do it, by the way, as business owners, the 360 assessment that gives you observation of people from different people that work with you, clients, direct reports, your managers, peers, and then you can see from the feedback, that 360 feedback that you give yourself compared to how others see you, where are the gaps. So it is a bit hard, but I can tell you that as business owners, it's easier to do that than when you are in a company, because every time you want to achieve a goal, you meet those obstacles and you see where it's hard for you, and then you start saying, I procrastinate, right? I perfect, I don't do this, I don't do that. And that's where you need to ask yourself the questions, what's going on here? And mostly what I will do is very simple. I will just ask, what are the emotions and the thoughts that show up for you right now?
Mm-hmm.
When you are procrastinating, what are the thoughts and emotions that show up right now? When you're perfecting, what are the thoughts and emotions? When you're avoiding, right? So you can start there. Maybe you will be able to find the answers on your own. Maybe you'll need to work with someone to help you, whether it's a mentor, a coach, other person, uh, maybe even a friend. But it's sometimes hard to do it on your own, but you can start there with just asking those very simple questions. What are the emotions and the thoughts that show up? You can break it down to beliefs, to perspectives, and start there just to pay attention and see where are your autopilots in those areas. Where are the things that you do without thinking about them? And it feels like you can bring yourself to the action that you want.
So we begin in this awareless state where
Right.
we don't really know why we're not taking these actions, why we're procrastinating, why we're avoiding, why we're being perfectionist, to
Mm-hmm.
asking the question, okay, what is the emotion regarding that? And are there other actions like that you would consider, avoiding, procrastinating, perfecting? Are there other signs like that you look at, because a
Well,
lot of this, it kind of sounds a little bit like lack of motivation, lack of confidence.
that's what we assume. But mostly what I see is that there is something beyond that. Okay. So, for example, procrastination. Many times is because you don't understand the purpose. You are missing
Yeah.
clarity. So actually, I believe there is a lot of wisdom to our resistance, why we procrastinate. And by the way, a good place to start is when you start asking yourself, why am I doing this? And why am I doing that? And why and why and why? So that's a great sign for you to realize that there is something maybe beyond just not doing. There is something deeper. And you might call it laziness. You might call it excuses. But I always see that there is something underneath that is much more interesting, and we need to be willing to do that work of telling the honest truth to ourselves. Now, some people say, well, some people don't like to talk about their emotions. And I say, bullcrap. People just don't like to talk about emotions if you ask them that in an annoying way. And one of the most annoying ways to tell a person, Victoria, so how do you feel about it? That's really annoying, right?
It could be. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe for somebody who doesn't do that. For me,
Yeah, right.
I'm okay with it, but I can see how other people would.
Yeah. So people don't like when you ask them, how do you feel? But definitely it's easier if I tell you what were the emotions and the thoughts that showed up in that situation when you wanted to go and pick up the phone and call that person and ask for help, and you didn't. You pushed and avoided it for the whole day, and you did your emails and you went to Facebook to do social media, but you didn't pick up the phone. What were the emotions there? And that brings all the feelings and everything and all the messiness. And that's why the middle part of my book is aware mess. So
Yeah, I
there
was
is
noticing that. So aware
right?
mess. So what is, yeah,
Yeah.
what, speak to that a little bit.
So that's really the part of we are, some people don't like the word messiness, right? Get messy because it feels like, oh, dirty. I don't like that. But I see that from a place of experimentation. Okay. um, when we understand that there is something there that is not working, and we can recognize that it's not working the way we want it to work, we need to figure out how to get out of the situation. And that's messy. It's just messy. There is no linear way for you to find a solution, and you need to experiment and you need to try, but you need to create yourself spaciousness to do that. Because if I come to that experience of experimenting from a place of it has to be perfect, I can't really find the answers. And if I come to that place, and perfect is again the procrastination. It all comes from the place of afraid of, right, fear of fail.
Right.
um, so how we can find that space of willingness to experiment. And I find that experimentation is easier than trying, or other words, because I don't commit yet. I'm willing to experiment with something, see if it works or doesn't work. And what makes it a lot of times messy, that is not fun, is that we talk about good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than experimenting and seeing what's working and not working, kind of like in a laboratory situation, we start labeling it as good and bad. And that's how we also communicate with other people and frustrate them, right?
Right.
And then we're stuck. But such an easy different just changing the vocabulary with ourselves. And I, since again this whole thing with languages got into my life, so I pay attention to how we define things and how we look at things and what is the vocabulary that we have with ourselves. And and that's where messiness can be something that is self-deprecating, or we can just get messy and have fun with that and say what's working, what's not working. Let's learn
Mm-hmm.
from it and move on, and keep doing that fine tuning until we find what works for us.
Right. So it's not about bad or good or right or wrong or, labeling. It's just
Yeah.
about understanding that, these are the feelings, the emotions, the actions, and these are the results that I'm getting as from feeling that way and from acting that way and from being that way.
Yeah.
For every action there's a reaction, and so
Right.
however I'm acting is creating this as a result. Do I like that result or do I not like that result? That's kind of what
Yeah.
I'm hearing you saying.
Yeah. And sometimes it's even seeing what are the body sensations. Let's say I say something or write something, or I don't know, doing a podcast interview. What are the sensations that I feel with that? Does it feel real for me? Does it feel fake? We don't pay attention. And there is a lot we can learn from how the body and the being energy respond or react to something that we're trying to do or be, if it's with ourselves, with the business, with other people. And we can learn a lot about that.
Right. So how does a person start to get in touch with this information and start to like really listen to these sensations that are going on in their body if they haven't ever really had any training with this before? Like what do you suggest?
That's a really good question. So some of us just never started with just saying, could that be part of the checklist in a way, right? Because we learned this is kind of like woo-woo, right? Intuition, all those things. So we let go of that very early. And I have to say, my little one, my youngest son of 3 kids, I remember I would pick him up from school, and I would think about something. It was in nursery school, so he was, I think, like 2.5 or 3, very young. And I would think about something, and suddenly he will ask me a question about that. And it happened again and again and again. And somewhere along the way, I believe it disappears, right? We kind of like let go of that because we see from the environment that we don't need to pay attention to our intuition. And for me, for example, it happened when I started the coaching training. I would ask people questions in the training, and I would get feedback from people, from the other coaches in the training, the student coaches, that I'm very intuitive. And I remembered my mother talking many times, telling stories about, her gut feeling. She just knew there was that experience. She just knew, right? And I said, maybe I need to start listening to people telling me that and listen to my intuition. And listening to your intuition, many times when I ask people, how do you know? It's that just knowing. You can't explain that, which is different than the fear.
Mm-hmm.
Fear is a concern and and the intuition is something that you just know and you don't know to explain, but there is a somewhat of body sensation, mostly in the gut, and that's why people call it gut feeling. Not
Right.
always. For me, for example, when I coach, if my intuition shows up, it shows up actually, it's very annoying. I will hear a word and it will show up again and again and again. It will nudge me until it's going to be like, you have to say that. You have to say that word. You have to say that word. You have to say that word, until I tell my clients, you know, there is my intuition is telling me that I need to tell you this word, and say, yes, exactly. That's the thing. Um, so did I answer your question?
Yes, yes,
I
definitely.
I think it's a process. It's not
Yeah.
easy, but first I think we need to open the door and say, do I want to explore and see if there is some body sensation I want to pay attention when I talk? Because if we don't open the door for that, how can we pay attention to that?
Right. And for some people, for you, it's in your gut. For other people, it might be in their throat. Some people might be
Mm-hmm.
in their heart. Some people might get, feel hot or cold or
Yeah,
various
yeah.
different.
Yeah, and that's why I say, like, mostly when I ask people, I say, "Is that your fear or your intuition?" They know. The thing
Hmm.
is that we know there are some things that we can't explain, but intuition is that I know. It's really
Hmm.
that I know. It's very intense experience that we just know.
For me, I've been asked that a lot. How do you know the difference between, what is your fear and what is your intuition? For me, and I'm just curious if this
Mm.
resonates with you, but for me, my intuition is actually a quieter, subtler voice, and my fear is like the louder voice. So you have to like look a little deeper because the fear is a little bit more of a surface emotion and the intuition is coming from a deeper place. I don't know if that resonates with you at all.
It does, and it's sometimes very confusing. Sometimes fear and intuition can be very confusing. And I still believe that the intuition is more of a centered voice, while
Hmm.
I think you call it loud and maybe soft or calmer. So for me, the fear is something that is restless. When the intuition, even when it warns me not to do something, it's very centered. But this is that's what I always tell people. This is my experience.
Yeah.
And that's the mess, that's the aware mess. We are different people, and the way we show up in this world and what works for us and doesn't work for us is very different from one person to another. So I never preach to say that what I do is the right way to do things and how I be is the right way to be.
Right.
You need to find your own system,
Hmm.
and it starts with that willingness to stop looking what other people do and find your own way and go on that journey of exploration, and it never stops. and
That
and
makes
that's what I
sense.
call the illusion of awareness. It never stops.
I was literally going to ask you, that was my next
Mhm.
question about, in your book, you talk about the illusion of awareness. So, just,
Mhm.
you know, before we, um, before we finish up here, can you speak to that a little bit, the illusion of awareness?
Yeah, so I really love that, because first is that basic understanding. And by the way, leadership means, one of the definitions is the road, the path, and it's really understanding that learning your autopilots and tendencies, it never stops. Whenever you think you learned everything about yourself, there is something new that you will learn about yourself. So whenever you think you climbed the mountain, and that's sometimes why people frustrated when they got to the top of the mountain, because then they say, oh, I thought it's the top of the mountain, but actually now there is a higher mountain or a wider mountain or maybe a river, right? So it never stops. So it's the same thing with learning about yourself. You feel like you learned everything, but there is always something new that you will learn. So it never stops. But what really, in a way, frustrating for me is that there are so many programs and trainings inside organizations where the focus is about teaching people how to get to the other side. Okay, so something is not working, let's learn how to fix that, and now you go with what you learn about fixing and your life will be beautiful. And it's not. People go back to their life, and very quickly they go back to old behaviors. And that's for me the illusion of awareness. And that's where people are frustrated with themselves and they start saying that they're lazy and, beat themselves up. And if you hear me, people, don't be upset with yourself, because that's what happens when we are overwhelmed and stressed and distracted. We go back to what we know, that awareness state. Okay, so for me, most of the focus when I do the work with myself, or when I work with other people, is to understand how I look like when I am in that awareness, when I am in my tendency, when I am in my autopilot. Because when I know, because before I was on autopilot. So I didn't know how to get myself out of the situation. But
Mm-hmm.
now I know what are my red flags. And then I can go kind of like literally back to that space when I'm distracted and stressed, overwhelmed, whatever you want to call it, and say, hey, Noah, you went back to your autopilot. What are you choosing to do? Are you going back to awareness, or are you going to stay? So now I'm at a choice. I'm not on autopilot anymore. I'm not what I'm going to call a victim of my actions. I can choose. And it's okay to choose to stay sometimes in a space of awareness and do kind of like the wrong things that I don't want to do, but I'm choosing to do so. And when I'm ready, because I gave myself the permission, I will go back. So the illusion for me, it's that promise that I will always stay there. And I push back around that. You don't have to agree with me, but I push back around that and I say most of the times we will go back in some situations, because that's what we did all our lives. That's what we
Mm-hmm.
know. So we go back, but we can bring ourselves from awareness to awareness, from awareness to awareness. It's energy. It's
Yeah.
energy. If you just want to understand that in a different way, think about it. When people say, I want to be happy, you're not happy all the time. It's energy. You're changing. You're
Mm-hmm.
you're happy, you're sad, you're angry, you're frustrated, you're disappointed, that you have joy. So there are all these things. It's changing, right? So the same thing is with awareness, creating awareness, creating new habits. And that's why I kind of like push back around the 30 days of habits and all that stuff. And I say, get to know yourself in that space of awareness, focus on that, learn your red flags, your emotions, your thoughts, your actions. And then you can always make a choice how to go back to to the way you want to be.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, this has been really, really insightful information on, helping people to understand how to go from awareless to understanding their aware mess, and and working through that and getting into awareness. And if you want to
Mm-hmm.
know more, I would highly recommend that you check out Noah's book, Beyond Leadership: From Awareless to Awareness. Dare to be the leader you can be. So, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. Any last tips of encouragement for our listeners?
Um, just focus on joy. It was I want to just say thank you. Thank you for allowing me to come here and having a joyful conversation with you. Um, why I say joy, because I feel right now in my life I'm trying to be with where I am rather than focusing on what's next that I did for so long. Some people call it the chasers. So how can I enjoy where I am and bring joy from where I am to my life and be resourceful with where I am in my life? So those are kind of like my words, and thank you for how you help people bring the power of the mind to people's life.
My pleasure. And yes, on that note, I 100% agree that it is about seeking that joy right now. It's there, available to you. You can be that way and bring that forth. And you're not going to feel happy at every moment. So embrace that. And
It's okay. You see, now we have a happy moment, right?
exactly. Right now, we can embrace how we are feeling, and hopefully, the power of your mind is bringing you joy week after week, and with wonderful guests like Noah who help us to understand ourselves a little bit better and understand how to use the tools that we all came here with. And so, I highly recommend grabbing a copy of the Beyond Leadership: How to Look Beyond the Action. And I don't think I said your book title right. Why don't
But
you
you
say
said
it?
it before. Yeah, beyond beyond leadership, from awareness to awareness. And just, feel free to keep the conversation with me on my website or social media. Always open to have conversations. So would love that.
Awesome. And all of that information will be available for you in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in to the Power of Your Mind podcast, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.